the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to tell you about something that happened to me when I was getting divorced. So I was a stay-at-home mom when I got divorced, and when the divorce was final, I was left with no health insurance. And it was a really scary time since I had been on my husband's excellent corporate plan for several years. It was scary to think about monthly payments, deductibles, rate increases, and more. I know I'm not alone in my experience. So if you are someone who will lose your health benefits when your divorce is finalized, I would highly recommend talking to Lorena Tomasini, a health and life insurance professional who can help you find the plan that's right for you. I trust Lorena. She's been in the business for 18 years. She knows so much. I've asked her every question and she answers it, and you can just tell she knows what she's doing. If you want to learn more about Lorena, you can find her at Malm, M-A-L-M-I-N-S for insurance, malmins.com. I also want to tell you about a wonderful divorce firm that goes by the name of Katz and Stefani. I have known co-founder Dan Stefani for over 20 years, and I completely trust him. He put his firm together with Andre Katz in 2008, and they have hired about, I think there are 10 other attorneys there right now. And I've met all the attorneys. They handle high asset, complex, high net worth divorce. They are the real deal. They have one of the best reputations in Chicago, and they're a class act. If you want to learn more, go to katzstefani.com. Every divorce case is hard. There's no question about it. But things can get a lot more complicated if someone's getting divorced to be with and or marry someone else. Emotions are higher. There's probably a lot more anger, resentment, and that's what I want to talk about today, how a divorce differs from other divorces if someone is leaving for someone else. And my guest has been a divorce lawyer for 17 years, and she has seen her share of these cases. Her name is Amelia Warchal, and Amelia is a divorce attorney down in Florida at the law firm of Klein Law Group. Great firm, great people. So hi, Amelia.
Hello, good afternoon.
So what do you think about what I said? Are cases different? Are they or another layer of complexity when someone is leaving for someone else?
There definitely can be. Obviously, if you have that type of a situation going on, it does tend to turn the dial up to 11, at least for a little while, with respect to, even getting people to the table to talk, because there is so much emotion that goes into that. You've had a marriage of, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and this is how it's ending. And there's a lot that entails. And I've been on both sides of that issue realistically, and it does impact how you have to approach things to get everybody to a point where you can even have a conversation about what do we do from here.
Okay, don't you feel like, well, I don't think that this has happened to you personally, and it hasn't happened to me either. I wasn't left for someone else. But I can only imagine, and I've talked to enough people, having Divorce Girl Smiling for 12 years that have been, and it stings. It's like this terrible, like it stings. It's there's so much anger and hurt. And because of that, the person who cheated and is leaving, that person has to realize that these decisions are gonna be hard to make for the other person, and it might be harder to get them to agree on things because their emotion is so, in the way of maybe even being rational at times.
Yes. Yes, and I mean, and you also have the aspect where, instead of this being a process where you're trying to get through it, it becomes punitive. And it forces somebody to dig, or not forces, but it compels somebody to dig their heels in a lot more because of the fact that you have this extra layer of anger and betrayal and hurt that's overlaying everything that you were trying to do.
Okay, now if somebody comes into your office for a consult and says to you, I just found out my husband is leaving me. He's leaving me for the woman he's been cheating with for 3 years. They're planning on getting married. I'm so mad. I'm so hurt. I'm devastated. I don't even know what to do. Is there any advice you give them as you embark on the process?
Yes. I mean, me personally as a practitioner, I mean, I try and talk to my clients about what the process is going to be like because they need to be informed, and also try to manage their expectations and really lay it out for them that, like, okay, well, to some extent this is horrible. It's absolutely horrible and nobody should have to go through this kind of betrayal, but to a certain extent, in most jurisdictions in Florida and Massachusetts as well, where I practice, that is not going to be the factor in most cases that the court is going to turn around and say, okay, well, you win the divorce. And that's a really hard pill for some people to swallow. Um,
Because they want the judge to say, "You cheated, and so your wife is gonna get this, this, and this," and that's not happening.
no, and it doesn't. I mean, and I've had conversations where I've told my clients, look, it can play a factor. I mean, because again, you have to take it back to most divorces are filed on grounds of, no fault. It's irretrievable breakdown, irreconcilable differences. However, whatever the particular language is for that
In
jurisdiction,
in how many states of 52 do you think are no-fault states?
I think all of them have it now. The last holdout, my understanding was it was New York.
Okay.
So, and that went away, I wanna say sometime, like, in either the late, 2000s or the early 10s. So
Okay. Alright,
but
so if you're listening to this, no-fault divorce means that if you've been cheated on, we don't wanna say it like this, like, no one cares, but in a legal sense, no one cares. I'm so sorry to tell you that. That might sound disheartening, unfair. It is. But when it comes to the legal process, the whole point of it is just to get divorced no matter why and to split everything up fairly, and I guess I call it equitable
yes.
distribution.
I mean, that's not to say that there are not those cases where you are alleging something on fault grounds, depending on the jurisdiction you're in. Adultery is a fault ground, abuse is a fault ground, so there are times where it's appropriate to do, but in my experience, typically what it if you start down that path, what it ends up doing is creating more work because as opposed to just saying, "Hey, I don't want to be married anymore," which is literally the only thing that you need to plead in most places. Now you have to do certain things to establish that there was an affair. You have to plead the third party. So it makes it a lot more complicated, and that even compounds everything else that's going on with the undercurrents of somebody that's in this type of a situation.
Okay, but let's talk about cost.
Mhm.
Before we get into the actual cost of the divorce and why here's where I'm going with this. I feel like these cases might cost more because the person who was cheating on won't won't bend as much, is Okay, but I want to get to that in a minute, but I don't want to forget to bring this up. What you're saying to me, I think, in a way, is that if somebody cheated and they have been spending money on their now spouse that they're leaving you for, that is something that you can get back in the divorce. So that makes me
Yes.
feel better.
So it's called, again, depending on where you are, it's either it could be dissipation or marital waste. And when I have clients that are in this type of situation, that's what I tell them is like, okay, if this is what's going on and somebody's paying, tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars for a paramour, for lack of a better term, because it could be a man, could be a woman, to take them on vacation or to buy them all kinds of things. That's the type of situation, depending on what the factual circumstances are that surrounds that. That yes, you may have a claim to say that all of that money should have been in the marital estate at the time it was divided. It wasn't, and then essentially what you're saying is all of that money, or at least half, but all of that money in some cases should go back to the other party, the non-cheating party, to make them whole.
And do judges, as a rule, agree with that?
It depends on what you are actually talking about as far as amount, as far as the overall size of the marital estate. I mean, if you have somebody that the marital estate is worth, $10 million dollars and somebody spends 10,000 to buy, whatever it may be for a girlfriend, that's much, much less likely to raise an eyebrow than, okay, the only thing we have in the marital estate is the marital home, and somebody liquidated an account to fund gifts for another party, and it was $10,000. It's a different circumstance because you have to look at these things holistically as far as what's in the estate, and you have to do the steps as the attorney to be able to establish, like, this is what the money did, this is where it went. We know this is what happened, to be able to show the judge, like, that was inappropriate spending prior to when all of this started happening.
Good point. You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today I'm here with Amelia Warchal, divorce attorney for Klein Law Group based in Boca Raton, Florida. And Amelia and I are talking about a divorce when one person is leaving for someone else. We're going to get into we're going to talk about the cost. We are also going to offer advice if you are somebody who is being left for someone else and you're going through a divorce. We'll be right back. My entire life, I've heard these words from my family. You're so sensitive. And what's so interesting is I always took that to mean I needed to work on myself to change and not be so sensitive. Then I met Sue Bruckner. Sue started explaining to me that there are certain people who have a brain sensitivity and can't help being the way they are, and that it wasn't a bad thing, it was just my makeup. I couldn't believe it because after all these decades, I thought there was something wrong with me, and in reality, it's just the way my brain processes things. This is what Sue specializes in. Sue started a support membership group for highly sensitive women called Tribe, and I am just so thrilled because I know it will help so many people. So if you want to learn more about this and work with Sue or be part of her group, just go to withintentioncoaching.com. I also want to tell you about a really wonderful law firm in Fort Worth, Texas. It's called Varghese Somerset, and they specialize in high net worth, high asset, complex divorce. Turner Thornton is one of the attorneys that I talk to a lot. We've done a lot of podcasts. You can find him a lot on the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast and articles on the site. He is just wonderful, so dedicated, so caring, really down to earth, and really, really knows the law. If you want to learn more, you can just go to versustexas.com, and you can find both Varghese Somerset and Sue in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girls Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today we're talking about if you are getting divorced because your ex is leaving you for somebody else. How is that divorce different from other divorces? My guest is a 17-year veteran divorce attorney. Her name is Amelia Warchal. Amelia works for Klein Law Group in Boca Raton, Florida. If you want to learn more about Klein Law Group, it's kleinattorneys.com. And all right, Amelia, do you think that these cases where someone's leaving for someone else tend to cost more, and why?
So in a lot of cases, they do and they can, uh, because to some extent you have taken rationality out of it. Um, and it's understandable, but that's where things tend to go off the rails is because you have somebody that has been hurt so much and now they're in a position where, for lack of a better term, they want the pound of flesh, and it can drive things up because obviously the more you have to litigate, the more that you're fighting over relatively narrow issues, the more expensive it's going to be depending on, especially with attorneys fees, but if you have professional fees involved as well because you have people that are helping you through mediation, whether it's forensic accountants or financial planners they're working with you through this process, it makes it harder because you're compounding the costs.
Okay, now I'm going to offer a point where I think I might disagree a little bit, only because some of those people can help you save money. Like, I was going to give the first tip that I would tell somebody who's listening in this situation is get a divorce coach.
Mhm.
Because, okay, you might spend $3,500 or $4,000 on a divorce coach. Those are like some package costs. And someone might say, well, wow, I don't want to spend 4,000. That $4,000 investment can save you like 20,000 with your attorney,
Right.
because the divorce coach is gonna say, "Listen, I know how you're feeling." They're gonna help you emotionally, and then they're gonna say, "Here's what makes sense. Ask for this." Right? I mean,
No, and that I agree with. I'm talking more if you're sitting in a mediation and you have your attorney, you have financial planner, forensic accountant, whatever it is, and you have somebody that is just completely shut down and most practitioners will tell you, and I've been a mediator and I've obviously sat in mediations with my client where there's always a room that somebody's got to do a little bit more work on. And if you have somebody that is so locked into their position and doesn't want to listen to the people that are around them, that's when you have the mediations that are going from 9 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, and there's no resolution. I
and you're right. You know what it is? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I couldn't this is they want the other person to suffer.
Mhm.
Like, they are so upset. And to people listening, we understand. I completely understand. It is not fair. Well, I did a whole podcast with somebody on how divorce is so unfair, but you have to really try to be, I don't want to say smart about it because that sounds condescending, but you have to really focus on the long term and say, this is
Right.
going to hurt me and it hurts, but I'm going to do what I can to get out of this with the best possible outcome so that I can move on and begin to heal.
And that's the biggest thing, and you have people, especially when you're going through the process or you're still really close to when things have broken down, that's a really hard thing to do. And, as I tell my clients, like at the end of the day, my job is to give you advice. So I may tell you, like, I understand why you want what you want, but that's not realistic. at this stage of the game, unless something else comes up. I mean, obviously, if you want to continue to litigate it, I'm happy to do that because you're the one that has to live with whatever deal gets struck. And my job is to give you as much advice as I can so that you know and you feel comfortable with whatever deal you happen to be making.
See, Amelia, you are like doing your job and you're a lawyer. So the reason a divorce coach could be so important is they could make your job so much easier
Mhm.
because the divorce coach is going to sit with the person and say, "Oh my gosh, I know." And
Yeah.
half of that most of those divorce coaches are all divorced themselves, so they get it. And they're like, "Listen, he's a jerk. He did this." They'll sit and talk to you for a long time and make you feel so much better and then say, "But you got to really, really think about it.
Mhm.
You told me you want to keep the house. This is how you're going to do it."
Right.
And then we're gonna deal with moving on and your pain and after, but right now, you need to be really, really businesslike about this and really try to take the emotion out of it.
Right. And again, like if you're looking at certain upfront costs for something like that versus an hourly rate of an attorney, depending on what you're dealing with, it is a good idea. I mean, I've had other coaches that I have worked with down here and up in Massachusetts that it does help. And the clients, because I tell clients all the time, like, I'm going to have to tell you stuff that you do not want to hear,
Mhm.
and you're going to hate me and you scream at me and think that on the other side situation. And having kind of that buffer to be able to have those types of
100%.
conversations
That's a
makes a
perfect
big
word.
difference.
They're a buffer. They're like a therapist, but they're not a trained therapist, but you're not going back in your past and saying, "Why did you marry this guy? It was an unhealthy choice because something you did in your childhood." They're
Mhm.
saying to you, "Okay, I'm gonna hold your hand and walk you through this so that we can spend the least possible amount of time and money and get the best outcome for your divorce." All right, I
Mhm.
have a couple more questions. Is it possible to mediate in these situations? What percent, if you had to guess, end up mediating?
So, well, we're in Florida, it all has to go to mediation. Doesn't mean you're gonna resolve it, but every case that involves a divorce or involves children
Okay.
is going to a mediator at some point.
Same with Illinois. If you have children, you have to mediate.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I guess what I'm asking is, are there cases where somebody was left for someone else and they ended up settling in mediation instead of going to trial? Well, trial we know only 5% go to, but down the long path of litigation.
Yes, I mean, there's sometimes it's easier than others, and sometimes people get, looking at the finances, they kinda realize that, "Look, I'm going to spend my kid's entire college fund to get to a point where I'm standing in front of a judge over an issue that may or may not have a legitimate impact on what an equitable distribution looks like at the end of the day." I mean, I had one where they were high net worth and it took 4 mediation sessions for us to get done. And that was a big part of it. It was definitely a big part of it. And it was a long-term marriage, and
Wait, are you saying it like it only took 4 mediation sessions?
oh, no. I mean, we
Because
were
I think that's pretty good.
when they're all day and to a certain extent, you're dealing with your because that particular case, we were really only dealing with distribution and alimony. So, it really does depend, but it was a lot, because of the fact that you get into situations sometimes where it looks like you've reached an agreement conceivably, and then you're going back and forth, and it's, either I want, or I changed my mind. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
And I
Uh,
changed my mind could stem from, "Oh, the kids just told me that they met your soon to be new wife and they love her." Well, now everything's off the table because 'cause I'm so pissed and hurt about this that I
right,
can't even look at you right now. You
right.
know? Okay, wait, I have to ask you another question. What advice do you have for the person who cheated when they say, look, if they come in and say, Amelia, I'm getting divorced, I'm getting remarried. Yeah, I feel bad about it, but I just want out so I can start my new life. What do you say to them about getting the divorce, you know, over quicker and less expensively? What can they do?
So that's the prototypical situation to me where I depending on how things go, I will tell them, we're going to get to a point where realistically you can be right or you can be done, and that's your choice. Because there's what the law says, and there's what kind of a negotiation you can get somebody to that is going to obviate the need for a trial and a lot of money in attorney's fees and costs.
Okay, so here's where I was going with this. So this is typical that I've heard about from I don't want to say hundreds, I'd say dozens of women who I know who their spouse left them for another woman. At the beginning, they were really, really nice about it. They were like, I feel so bad. And they were like, I'm going to give you a lot. You're not going to have to worry. You won't have to work. And then some time goes by, and the person who was cheated on starts getting angry. And the person who cheated starts being like, well, I don't want to pay this. Now the guilt is wearing off. And then they start to blame their spouse that they cheated on and said, you had fault in this marriage too. Do you
Mhm.
ever so I want my listeners to know that Amelia is nodding like
Yes.
emphatically.
We've definitely
This is
had
what I
that.
see happen. And then the other person, then it becomes like an all-out war. And what I wanna give as advice, and Amelia, tell me if you agree with this. If you're getting divorced because your ex is with someone else and he's leaving you for that person, and he's being really nice at the beginning, I tell people to rush as quickly as they can to get the divorce over with while they're still in that giving mode. Because if too much time goes by, they're going to end up getting angry. And so I have a friend who this happened to. She got the best settlement in the world because she settled right away.
Mhm.
And she said that was the best thing I could have done. What do you think?
No, and I think that there because of the amount of psychology, for lack of a better term, that plays into this specific area of law. Yeah, I mean, there are times when you have to take that into account to get the deal done. And there are going to be times, even throughout the a regular divorce, where you have certain periods in time where it may be better to push for a deal because everybody's in the right mindset to get something like that accomplished. And yes, if you're in a situation where you have one party that feels really, really guilty about, okay, I've ruined my marriage, that may be the opportune moment to say, okay, well, here's what I would like. Obviously, it's easier in some circumstances than others because some cases you have a lot of information that you need to gather to be able to sit down and go, okay, this is what we're dealing with dividing, and this is what we're dealing with for incomes, and this is what we're dealing with the kids. So sometimes it's not necessarily feasible, but depending on what information you have while that you've got somebody that's in that kind of mindset, you should try. I mean, I usually tell people you are always better to negotiate, and it doesn't necessarily matter, you know, when that is. But if you have somebody that you know is in the right frame of mind to actually sit down, and it works for the person that was cheated on too, because if they are so angry that they can't get over it, especially if I'm sitting on the side with the person who has cheated, you tell them, like, "You're gonna have to wait a little bit, because if you go in to try and resolve this right now, you're not gonna get anywhere." And it's the converse on the side with the person who feels guilty is they may be more at the very beginning, are going to be more amenable to throwing a little bit more at the other side to see what they can do to get it resolved.
And that's what where these divorce
Yeah.
coaches come in, because they can make that time span a lot shorter. Well,
Right.
I want to say in closing that for anybody listening to this, if I had to guess, because I got divorced through litigation, but then settled before a trial. This is 18 years ago, and then went back to court for post litigation twice and didn't have a divorce coach. There were no divorce coaches back then. It was 2008. And if I had to guess, we probably spent like $60,000 on our divorce. And right now, we have to pay for my daughter's last year of college. And it's like, had we not been so stupid and angry, that would not be an issue right now. So I just want people listening to say, like, learn from Jackie. You don't want to find yourself 15 years later having to pay for college because you were angry and you went back to court over silly things just because of anger that you could have mediated. And so I just wanted to say that to people. Mhm.
That's something that, especially when you're in the process, it's very easy to lose focus and have things spin out of control, and that's what happens. I mean, it's the same fights that you have people that get into. I mean, I think the worst personal property fight I ever had was who got what set of Calphalon pans, and, like, you're paying ridiculous amounts of money for 2 attorneys to sit here and hack this
Although
out.
those are really nice
They're
pants.
really nice, but by the time you take a look at it, you could have bought brand new
Right.
for what you're paying for 2 attorneys to sit down and try and hash this out. And if you have reasonable people or reasonable attorneys that are trying to get to a settlement, that's what you want, as opposed to going cutthroat and expecting, everybody to have bloody knuckles at the end of the day. Because you can do it that way. I mean, I enjoy trial work, but that's not necessarily what's going to be best for you, because you're going to be in a position where 15 years down the line, you're paying for college.
Right. Absolutely. Amelia, thank you so much for taking time to be on the Divorce Girl Smiling podcast.
You were very welcome. It was great, and thank you for having me.
And to people listening, if you want to reach Amelia, you can find her at kleinattorneys.com. The name of the firm is Klein Law Group. They're in Boca Raton, Florida. You can also find Klein Law Group in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling, which is divorcedgirlsmiling.com. And you can go there also to find other trusted, vetted divorce professionals, listen to my podcast, other episodes, read articles, and sign up for my free consult. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.